As most of us know, there are indicators out there that can go a few different ways. But as we also know, one of those ways is typically superior to the others. We have found this to be the case with the trigger lines indicator. And as usual, we have done all the work for you. You're welcome. And some of you out there have already seen this indicator in action on Stonehill Forex. Dan had to travel, so he had to put this up early. So a lot of you got a sneak peek. But for those of you who still want my take on it, or those of you who have not seen this before, welcome to the Indicator Profile Series. I have a feeling this one might be a bit longer than usual, so let's go ahead and get into things. But first off, if you're new, understand this is the premier indicator channel in all of YouTube. Always has been, always will be. But because of that, we do things a certain way and we talk a certain way. So instead of getting confused and asking me a bunch of questions, go to nononsenseforex.com, read the homepage, watch the video on that homepage, and get caught up to the rest of us. It's worth it. But for the rest of us, let's go ahead and get into the specs. The year this was created was 2018, well within the 1996 and on threshold we like to see here at the Indicator Profile Series. This is going to be a confirmation indicator. This is going to be a chart overlay type of confirmation indicator. We like these, and we don't get a chance to do them often enough, I don't think. So we're happy to bring this one to you. And, you know, this could have been a different type of indicator, like we talked about in the introduction. But this particular style was the one that turned out best. One of the reasons it did is because as an exit indicator, it's a green light. As you're about to see, it's far from perfect. But with the right tweaking and adjustments, you might just have something here. So without further ado, let's go take a look at it. So, a few things to talk about here. Now, this is going to be a color change chart overlay. So when things go from magenta to teal-ish, which is going to be right here, I think, that's going to be your long signal. And then when the inverse occurs, right maybe here, that's going to be your short signal. Seems a little bit late, doesn't it? Well, that's because it is. Now, God, there's so many things to talk about here. Let's get this one big thing out of the way. Now, this, by nature, is actually a moving average crossover. If you look really closely, you can see these are two lines, and then when they cross, that's when the color change occurs. Now, long ago, I did a video in the Core Concept series, or maybe it's technical analysis, probably technical analysis, talking about how simply using this as a baseline would be superior in almost every case, as opposed to using it as a moving average crossover. Thing is, though, and if it's not already obvious, this is not your typical moving average crossover. How often do you see two lines traveling in pretty much the same direction, and then all of a sudden they decide to overlap? You know, that's not how your typical moving average crossover works. This is very different. Now, I've said this before. I'm going to say it again, though, because there's always somebody that's like, oh, you said this. All right. There are always exceptions to many things. To me, when it comes to trading psychology and often money management, I don't think there are very many exceptions, if any. But technical analysis, there can be. Here's the problem. When I'm teaching you something brand new for the first time, you know, we have a lot of people who are ADD cases, who are autistic, you know, because for some reason this market draws people like that into it, which is great. But people like us tend to overthink things. This is why I was never good at algebra, because I always thought about exceptions. I'm like, well, what if this happens? Well, what if this over here happens? So I had to keep things as black and white as humanly possible so I could give you and everybody else a blueprint on how to do things. And then as certain exceptions come into play later on, after you're already experienced with that blueprint, then we come in later and say, okay, now that you know how to do this and you've gotten your reps in, let me show you some exceptions to that rule. If I were to show you this exception back when I first made that video, it would have completely muddied the waters. And it would probably send your ADD brain into all sorts of different directions. We want to avoid that. All right, so now that that's out of the way, yes, this is a moving average crossover. It is not like your typical moving average crossovers at all. That's why I think this indicator is so intriguing in a lot of ways. And yes, if you just say, I'm going to use this as a baseline, then yeah, you certainly would have gotten in earlier, at least on this example, almost every time. However, look at this too. Here's a loss that would not have happened had you just kept everything traditional and just obeyed this indicator for what it was. Same here. This thing does have a tendency to do a really good job of keeping you in trades. Now you're going to say, well, it did not do a very good job of that here. Fair point. But you guys know, especially with exit indicators, when things come down pretty fast like that, it nullifies most of your exit indicators because it just can't see it in time. So if you have proper money management, have your stop loss break even in place, your trailing stops in place, that's going to mitigate most of this. But all the same, as a confirmation, we found this to perform better as a confirmation chart overlay color change indicator than we did a baseline. Feel free to use it as a baseline and test it for yourself, but we want to stick to top performers here on the indicator profile series. So let's go see how this performed. But before we do that, understand you have to test these yourself. All that matters is how it performs in your system. The indicators that probably perform at the very, very top in this series are likely not going to be the best indicators for you. And sometimes indicators that seem like they underperform could actually be exactly what your system needs. So make sure you're doing that. Also, down below in the description, you are going to get my automation blog, a link to my automation blog that has an embedded video on how to test these things yourself on the MT4 strategy tester. Also, a link to the indicator blog, always required reading. If you want to see the tweak settings that we don't show you here, the history, the math, all that stuff behind this indicator, that's where you're going to find it. You will also get Dan Stone's second email address if you'd like to submit an indicator for us to maybe profile here on the show. We've already done it once. Next time could be yours. And then, as always, a place where you can download every indicator we have profiled here on MT4 for your own usage. MT5, TradingView, we don't know. We can't account for that. Hopefully it's there, but it's definitely on MT4, and that link is where you go download them. And let's make an announcement now. Let's do it. We are adding a new link down below, and that link is going to be Dan Stone's YouTube channel. He has one, if you didn't already know. He does make videos on these indicators, and he embeds a lot of those onto the blog itself, so you can just watch it there. And if you want to know more about the indicator we cover on this episode, or if you want to go a little further in depth, or you want to see Dan test for repainting, which he also does, you can find all of that every week on Dan's channel. You know, those videos are kind of like the Talking Dead version of Our Walking Dead. So these videos give you everything you have to know, but if you would like to know more and you'd like to see it in video form, go there, subscribe to his channel, because he also does other things too. He does indicators that we don't cover here. That's worth a look. And he also does things like, or he's starting to do things like MT4 tutorials, you know, a lot more basic stuff too. Because there's people out there who just take better to the way Dan explains things as opposed to the way I explain things. I actually don't think I explain basic concepts that well. You know, intermediate to advanced is more my wheelhouse. But I will leave the link to his channel down below as well from this point on, just so you know. Now, let's finally get into the results here. EURUSD, very good. Again, we got this last week, I think. Another one of those cases, too, where you have a super high win-loss ratio with a very low amount of trades, though. That's going to be the trade-off here. After you finish adding, you know, other pieces of your algorithm, this could very well end up being, you know, like 8, 7, 6 trades. You know, so what do you do with that? Is that good news or is that bad news? Because this right here is good news. That's a very good number for the EURUSD. Over to gold. A little more humble in terms of results that we've gotten here. We've gotten some results in the 30s, 40s in terms of ROI, some even higher, I think, in some cases. So maybe not so much here. But again, for those people who like lower amounts of trades, this might be appealing to you. Over to the S&P. Again with the low trades, but with the right amount of tweaks, we got this thing from 2.5 all the way to 12. That's really good for the S&P. That's one of the weird things about the results this week. This underperforms on the things that have overperformed, but it overperforms on the things that have historically underperformed here, like Forex, like indices. So again, if you're okay with taking more of a laid-back approach, or you have a lot of indices that you trade, and you don't want to have 5 or 6 active trades going on at one time, this might be something you really like. Now, I kind of gave away the results on Bitcoin. They are going to underwhelm a little bit, but that's nothing to sneeze at. Good results, again, low amount of trades, and certainly something to test out as an exit indicator as well. But thank you for sitting through this longer version of the Indicator Profile series. A bit of a late release as well. Thank you for that. But we're going to have so much more. We don't stop. Subscribe, hit the bell. Trading Psychology Podcast every Monday, the single most important thing we do nowadays. Indicator Profile series every Wednesday, blog on Thursday, and an investment podcast, a 10-minute contrarian, every Saturday. Bulletproof yourself, traders. Could be some storms coming on the horizon. We got your back. So go get it.